You're listening to Raiding the Fringe with Poda, Ostinius, Nepids, and Dr. Lee. From ancient civilizations to the cutting edge of science, from exploring the outer reaches of space to the Atlantean depths, we discuss the topics of the unknown and the possibilities of the bizarre. Are you hungry to expand your horizons? Come get your fill as we raid the fringe. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Raiding the Fringe. Today we're going to discuss the idea, thought processes, mythology, and possible scientific backing to sea monsters. Here, as always, with me is Nep.
Hello.
Ostinius.
Hey.
And Dr. Lee.
Welcome back.
All right, I think a fair point to start would be what, to your understanding, what defines a sea monster? There's a lot of stories out there, but what do you think defines what a sea monster is to be categorized as a sea monster?
It's a pretty subjective term. Anything from it's got to be from the water.
I mean, obviously, in the sea, it's got to be aquatic, and I think there's a lore to it, too. There's got to be something that drives the imagination to believe that it's a sea monster. You know what I mean? Like, there's got to be some sort of sailor tales of what happened when they were out and about.
Well, those are the best ones, but I really think if I found, a half a ton blob on the beach and no one can define what it was. I know most of the time it turns out to be something, but you could have a sea monster without lore. You could be the first one to see it.
True enough. Okay. I can see that.
But in general, I would have to say they'd have to be rather large. Like, I suppose there can be tiny sea monsters, but you wouldn't call them monsters so much as creatures,
Yeah. If you saw some plankton, what the hell is that? It's little monsters. No, but nobody would say that.
And the washing up on shore is an interesting point because there has been a lot of claims throughout human history of giant carcasses that cannot be identified washing up on shore, and they could be an unknown species. Some of them have said to be looked like plesiosaurs, or like the goo, which was the giant glob monster that people didn't know if it was part of a jellyfish or a giant squid or anything like that.
They call them globsters.
Yes.
See that globster?
Well, a lot of them, too, have been found out to be a certain type of sperm whale. When they die and decompose in the water, their blubber separates from their body.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't explain all of them.
Well,
nope.
I mean, if you're saying sea monster, even though you also have to put into account there are some monsters that weren't really monsters. They were misunderstood or ornery, animals, as it were. Moby Dick, a sperm whale. But was Moby Dick a sea monster? Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, and you've got things like the frilled shark.
Or a whale shark. They actually will not attack a human, but if you come across one, that is scary. It looks like a shark with a maw, a gape that could easily swallow a human being, but ultimately they only eat like krill and like little things like a whale would eat.
Huh.
But it's a huge shark, and when you see it, there is no mistaking that is a shark.
That's true. They are using that shark as a identifier for when people make reports of seeing megalodon, because its skin pattern tone is very distinct. But the megalodon, which could be considered a sea monster, which may or may not still exist, has that jet black skin like a great white.
Well, a great white is called a great white because it doesn't have stark black skin. It's a great white.
You, sir, are whale racist.
Great white lives matter. So there's.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, the great white though has a bluish tint over the top with a distinct white belly. The whale shark has more of a brown topping spotted with white. You know what I mean? There's a vast difference. The The megalodon, they think that what people have assumed is the coloring is very similar to a great white. So the top would be a little bit darker blue in tint with a relatively light colored underbelly. But the thing is, like, the whale shark doesn't have teeth that are 3-4 inches big per tooth, whereas a megalodon did. So, people could say that, hey, that's a megalodon, but obviously it wouldn't be because they don't look the same. I mean, really.
No. Well, I think we should definitely bring up the two most famous sea monsters in history, the Leviathan and the Kraken, which by description are two distinctly different types of creatures.
Now, have they pegged, Mr. Research, have they pegged what a Leviathan looks like? I didn't do research, so.
Well, I attempted, but that's research on a mythological creature is a very sparse endeavor in itself.
The stories of the Leviathan are so varied. Some actually have it as a tentacled creature. Some have it looking fish-like. It's the Leviathan of the deep. They are monsters of various shapes. But the only thing that really keeps them together is the fact that they're gigantic.
Yeah.
See, I would imagine a Leviathan being more deep sea. I mean, it could be the Nessie kind of plesiosaur kind of,
yes,
kind of thing. But ultimately, a lot of the accounts of a Leviathan are more whalish or something along those lines, whereas a Kraken could have been misidentified. Misidentified giant squid or colossal squid.
Well, that's exactly what the Kraken was.
Yeah, exactly. So we're talking like tentacles versus just gigantism.
Yeah, to my understanding, the giant size is prevalent in both, but the Leviathan, the majority, the commonality, and a lot of the stories I've heard involve a giant serpentine-type creature with a reptilian-type head, long, slender body, but has 4 arms, kind of like a Chinese dragon, but underwater, webbed toes. And then the Kraken has definitely always been more cephalopod with the tentacles and the giant mouth underwater, kind of like the Charybdis in Greek mythology.
Okay, so if we're going with that kind of nomenclature, the Leviathan would still have a serpentine kind of body to it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Would it wrap itself around boats? Would it still be the same danger to sailors from abroad?
Yeah, I think that's what they're saying.
Yeah, the Leviathan stories that I've heard don't involve tentacles, but more of tail, long, big head, 4 limbs of a reptilian nature, and
like Cetus from Greek mythology.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the one that was sent to kill Andromeda.
But then the Kraken, on the same account, is a lot of cephalopod that I remember. Those involve the tentacles and the just cephalopod in nature, really. Just how octopus and squid do. And then there's also a giant, what I would consider a sea monster in mythology that isn't as coined on the phrase of sea monster because it's more benevolent and benign, just going about his business, but that giant ass sea turtle that supposedly has cities on its back or a whole island.
What is that called?
I don't remember.
It's called the sea turtle.
The sea turtle. I always liked that idea, like that there was an animal or some sort of ancient creature that was so large, could carry, there could have been habitat created on its back, and it's just been kind of dormant for hundreds of years, and every so often gets up and moves around.
Oh, like on Dr. Dolittle with the pink sea snail.
Yeah, something like that, or something like Avatar, where it's, oh, hey, you're this ancient lion turtle or whatever they were, but it ultimately had, or okay, so something more prevalent, Detective Pikachu. They had those Terra Turtles or Terra Tortoise or whatever, and they had these economies on their backs, and they would get up and move around.
Yeah, the consistency seems to be, according to the internet, just the term is world turtle.
Oh, the world turtle is the giant turtle that carries the entire world on its back.
That's a flat Earth.
Oh, that's the...
No, that's a religion. That's like related
Hindu.
to Taoism or something.
I think it's Hindu. I think.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're definitely talking about a different turtle then. Because that was also, I heard stories like, well, that's where Atlantis is. It's on its back.
On a turtle's back?
Yep.
Well, that didn't come up in the conversation. That would have been good.
When we talk about Atlantis?
Yeah.
That episode? Yeah, that would have been awesome.
All right. Well, what do you think the odds are, just statistically, scientifically, that there's giant sea monsters still undiscovered in the ocean?
Statistically, I think there's a good 65-70% chance that there are things humongously crazy in the ocean that we have never seen or we don't know about.
I might even go higher.
Yeah, until recently, the giant squid or the colossal squid weren't ever captured on tape until like 2012 or something like that. That was not so long ago, and that's just one thing. There are so many others that are in our deepest oceans that we would have no idea about.
Well, I mean, the ocean is also so vast that it's not just the depths. This could be a surface thing that our boats literally just haven't come across, because you could send an entire fleet across the ocean and there's still miles and miles of ocean that they're not seeing while they're crossing, you know? So this could be something that has a migration pattern that dodges most of our transport needs.
True enough. I mean, and then if you think about it, like our little submarine vehicles that are like robot operated because no human could withstand the pressure when they go down to some of these depths. That we've already discovered things like bioluminescence and some crazy shit like that. What's to say that mechanical output, that electromagnetism from the electrical workings of that submarine or whatever, don't off-put some of these creatures? So we haven't seen them because in looking for them, we are pushing them away.
Oh, yeah. They run away.
Yeah. I mean, there could be crazy sea monsters like that.
Like the Hydra.
It's very, very possible. Or like that dinosaur crocodile thing from Jurassic World. You know what I mean? Like, there's all sorts of stuff that we don't have any idea about. And us looking for them puts them off enough that we will never see them because of our interaction.
And what do you think, if we searched too hard for such a creature, we ourselves would make it extinct before we could even find it, because we've given it no more places to hide?
Yeah, we've driven it away from its natural habitat. And
didn't even know.
Yeah.
And then, with the pollution in the ocean rising and the plastic and the other toxins, we could have already killed off, couldn't even imagine how many species that we never discovered, that we never will, because they're dead now at the bottom.
Oh, yeah. We could have killed the microscopic sea creature that feeds on, that the small sea creature feeds on, that the sea monster lives on.
Oh, yeah, true enough. True enough.
You know, assuming they don't live on pirates and fishermen.
I've got a specific diet, matey.
And you know,
that's Davy Jones. Oh, Davy Jones.
The singer from the Monkees? No, but you ever notice, I mean, I guess it makes sense, the only stories can come from the fishermen, but the fishermen don't go out into the middle of the Atlantic or Pacific to fish. It's always just miles off the coast.
Well, those stories don't always come from them. They came from sailors, and the sailors, I mean, whether it's goods, cargo, people, would ship things across the ocean,
Okay.
and you still got ocean madness and stuff like that. People seeing mermaids. I mean, would a mermaid or a siren? I mean, technically, those are sea monsters.
Well, you actually raised a really good point that I never thought about. Because of modern technology and how our shipping industry works and the types of vessels in the ocean with the electro fields coming off of them and the magnetism and the sounds and the vibrations pushing creatures away, that I think is a viable argument for their existence, in the sense that ancient tales of mariners, they didn't have that technology. They were just wooden boats.
Yeah. And
So it wouldn't draw them out.
Sails and what have you.
That could be a game changer.
Yeah, so they would come in contact with them more often than our modern technology. Like us trying to sweep Loch Ness, stuff like that. Maybe those very electromagnetic waves, those sonar waves, are keeping it, like it tells it, the creature, Nessie, where the boat is, and it can easily, dodge the boat.
Who's to say that none of these creatures can generate their own? I mean, we've got electric eels and stuff. There might be some that actually respond to it directly.
That's very plausible. I mean, especially creatures of the deep. You got anglerfish and like certain squid or jellyfish that have bioluminescence. I'm telling you, that doesn't come out of nowhere. There is an electromagnetic field that comes off of that is generated. Who's to say that doesn't repulse? I mean, that's why they do it in the first place, right? That's a defense mechanism, or in
the anglerfish, it's for attracting.
That's an attractor, but maybe it gives off its own electromagnetic field to attract certain fish, whereas like jellyfish, it propels.
So could we tinker with our instrument? If we knew what we were doing, we could tinker with our instruments and emit the proper electromagnetic field to reverse that effect and actually attract these creatures. If we knew how, that would make the hunt a lot easier.
The pinpoint is to pinpoint what exactly that they are doing. As of right now, we haven't tried to do anything like that. It's all observation. We haven't, I mean, to cut open a jellyfish and be like, oh, this is why it lights up. Like, we haven't gotten to that point in science that we can kind of pinpoint that stuff.
What about, topic of government intervention on species for practical, productive, and or military applications.
Sharks with freaking laser beams on their freaking heads.
That's right.
Dolphins trade to rescue spies.
Yeah, or straight genetic engineering of hybridized sea creatures for surveillance. Not actual attacking locations, but for surveillance in the water, like a biological robotic drone.
Would it be implanted with some sort of mechanism, or are you talking like there's a trainer or something that like...
Well, I think there's two branches. There's the branch that's completely genetically made and just trained, and it has some kind of free will, but it's through training, also use the term torture, to do certain things and abide by certain rules. Or you have what's big and scientific and sci-fi is a biological vessel powered by an electronic computed brain that is completely controlled remotely.
I fail to see the advantage of having an aquatic spy.
Aquaman was the most useless person in the Justice League.
Well,
I'm just going to say that.
I agree for that it's highly unlikely for the espionage route here on Earth, but for actual galactic endeavors and understanding planets and probes and drones.
I feel like let me retract my statement. I feel like we're being a little harsh on it, because back in the day, like World War II and stuff, there was a lot of submarine activity You're talking. It would have been useful to know the enemy's movements under the water, but because for a long time our history has a lot of maritime, accidents or like a lot of attacks that have come from the sea. The Navy, Coast Guard, and stuff like that was very prominent for the longest time because that is what we knew as the mode of transportation. Now it's kind of come more to aerial stuff because we have planes and things like that. But for a long time, it was all ocean based.
That's true. Yeah.
So who's to say that, two genetically modified dolphins couldn't have had another dolphin baby that was natural, but ultimately genetically modified that could talk to humans? I mean, you've heard about the orcas and the dolphins that they're trying to teach English to. Have you not?
No.
Yeah, they're trying to teach them. It generally started at SeaWorld, but they can get an orca and a dolphin to say hello. Does it sound awesome? Do they go, hello? No. It's more like, hello. And it goes, hello. You know what I mean? But it is like they're imitating the sound, much like a parrot would or something along those lines. But those are really intelligent creatures.
Yeah.
And I don't know, the possibility is there.
And I think that is an interesting fine line between mimicking sounds and actually identifying reason to those sounds.
Right.
And understanding when the dolphin says boat, it actually means boat and not barnacle or shellfish.
Yeah.
It sounds like something that Hitler would have experimented with.
Oh,
when you brought up the World War, it's like, I could totally see that he might have done that from that angle, especially since, the air travel wasn't, as cheap and efficient as it is now.
German U-boats.
Yeah, and there were a lot of submarine actions, and if you disguise it as an animal, now I can see why there might be some advantage to that. And I'll go one step further. On his fall, on many of his projects were buried or lost or whatever. These genetically modified sea creatures might have bred and mutated and become a lot more of those sea creatures that we've yet to discover.
That's all I'm saying. Those mutations could, be perpetuated breeding.
Life will find a way. Man, I'm back out there. It's like sea slugs. I'm also glad they are the size they are now. Because sea slugs are actually quite a productive predator in their level, in their tier, with their harpoon and basically engulfing their prey.
I mean, even other things like pistol shrimp. You know what I mean? They can put in or like kind of contract to have this little, shots worth of air that they can put out and pinpoint like an aim to catch their prey. Like that's pretty amazing, especially under the water. They can siphon that out, get that in their body to a point where it will do deadly damage to whatever their prey is. That's amazing.
Yeah, like the mantis shrimp.
Consider them that's not a sea monster, but it kind of is. If you went down there, they could shoot out your ankle, like, you know what I mean, like, and it's a shrimp. That's amazing.
Yeah, like the mantis shrimp is also cool. The one that basically punches things into submission, creates a shockwave, like a tiny sonic boom right to the dome.
You mix that with an archer fish that can shoot out of the water.
Yeah, or flying fish that jump out and their fins on the sides, are able to like glide them on the air for a time.
So now we've devised a fish that can jump out of the water and shoot a sonic wave at you before it lands back into the water.
We got assassin fish, everyone.
Giant murder hornet fish.
Yeah, that that is a sea monster that I don't want to come across. I'll tell you that.
Travel in a school, mix them with barracuda.
If they all work as a team and shoot one shot and blow out the hull of a ship.
Oh yeah, and especially if they all attack like the same, like 1 inch area, like the same spot. You know what I mean?
Okay, so which is scarier? A school of those or an actual giant kraken with its tentacles wrapping around your boat and pulling everything down?
I don't know. I think on a boat, people got like cutlasses, scimitars, knives at the very least. You have to cut rope and stuff on a boat. You know what I mean?
Maybe guns.
You could slice up the tentacles. You can cut up the tentacles. Now, I think there was an over-exaggeration. I mean, the largest squid, the colossal squid that we've ever found remnants of or anything like that, we're talking was from, tip of the head to bottom of the longer tentacles, like 44 feet. I mean, that's a big squid. And I could see how if you're on this sailing ship, a big old tentacle slops over the side. But dragging down the boat, I mean, I think people would have their little swords out, and knives out, and could chop it up.
44 feet is taller than a 3-story building.
It is, but the pull of it, the strength behind that, I doubt that would ever be enough to split a sailing ship made of oak.
I disagree. If you're talking more squid, possibly, but if we're talking more muscle power like octopi, definitely.
And we're talking most of these tales were from those rickety old wooden ships we were talking about, not modern shipping.
Well, I guess that's true.
Whereas they might have been able to take down a private fisherman's boat in the 17th century.
Oh, you're talking like a little rowboat kind of thing. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean,
that guy's screwed.
Obviously, only icebergs can take down the Titanic.
Are coming out with a ring. It's getting pulled to the depths. I was talking like maritime, like Spaniard sailing vessels, like, the 13 sail kind of big old ship. There's no way. I mean, you might get a sloppity side of a tentacle or something, but you're not going to be in any danger of them dragging you.
You have to take into account the beak, because if it's wrapping around that ship, that beak is going to be snapping and decimating the integrity of that ship.
That's true too.
That is true.
And you're a fisherman, you've been fishing all your life, and this beast is big enough to take down, even though it's a little ship to you, it's your ship, it can take down your ship. When you go spread that tail, it took down my whole ship. They don't know how big a ship was. They took down my whole ship, blah, blah, blah. And the stories can get bigger. And then the guy who writes the map, I better draw a picture on this corner of this ocean to warn people.
I got a fish this big. By the end of it, I got a fish this big.
Yeah, the big fish story, always true. Yeah. And so the cartographers have to put it on the map to warn ships not to go that way.
Okay, so...
It looks huge on the map.
Yeah, I mean, but it does, but you're right. It's always like in like the Atlantic Ocean kind of area that they always put like the Kraken, whereas there's like the Sea Dragon kind of thing that's always like in the Pacific Ocean.
I never paid attention to that.
Yeah, generally they're all on the same side throughout these maps.
I'd have to look into that. I mean, if that were the case, I would guess that's probably because the Atlantic Ocean is much choppier and much more, stormy than the Pacific Ocean. It's why it's called the Pacific Ocean, because it's very pacified.
Right, but you also
the temperatures. So the tentacly, thrashier ones being in the Atlantic side, and the serpentine ones being on the Pacific side.
Kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, when you think of the temperature, there is a large temperature difference. I mean, one ocean is more often colder with the currents than the other.
I think that would have to alter with the latitude, but yeah,
Well, I
maybe.
mean, granted, but all in all, I mean, as a generalization.
All right. Well, Nep, you got any thoughts on sea monsters?
Well, possibly the reason why that every ocean is different. What you guys are just talking about, the what is it, alkaline or the actual makeup of the water is completely different. So when Pacific and Atlantic come together, they are completely two different colors and two different things.
There's
So they could possibly, it's not just the temperature; it's actually the makeup of the water and stuff like that. So they definitely have a different tone about it, and so that's why. It just shows that this area is, dangerous, so they would put a sea monster that is dangerous on that side, you know what I mean? But as for sea monsters, I mean, there's no telling what's at the bottom of the ocean, so Lord knows.
Well, and just like there are those depictions on maps of, the kraken or the sea serpent, there's also, normally around the Bermuda Triangle area, a maelstrom, like a whirlpool, is always depicted on there too.
Yeah.
We're talking old school maps.
But with what Nep was saying, because each ocean's got its different, physical characteristics within it, that perhaps those creatures literally are indigenous to one ocean or the other.
Yeah.
Fascinating. I think it's a breakthrough.
Like freshwater versus saltwater, except this is eastern saltwater versus western saltwater.
Well, I mean, but you're also talking so one of the huge characteristics of sharks is that they cannot stop swimming because the movement of them going through the water is what filters, the oxygen through their gills. Yet there is a sept of nurse sharks that live in this volcanic spring that are able to sleep, like sleeper sharks. They're able to just lay in this hot water that shouldn't be viable for them, but because of the filtration of the water coming through these, it filters the water through their gills without them being having to move.
That is a very good point when you talk about creatures and sightings, is hibernation or possible sleep patterns of different times of the year.
Well, it's just like any cryptid. You really have to break it down zoologically to kind of get how they work as a animal, as a creature of the earth.
All right, so we would agree scientifically that the ocean is perpetually the environment that can create all sorts of varying life forms by the resources inherent in it, given what we understand of planetary cores and such. So, okay, what about space sea creatures? And when I say space sea creatures, I mean space creatures is general, but space sea creatures in the sense of on another planet that we haven't been able to identify. Like is it Jupiter or Saturn's moon? Maybe Jupiter, Europa, that's supposed to be damn near all ocean underneath an ice cap that could have actual sea life, not just bacterial down there, theorized. Like there could be large aquatic creatures.
I don't recall if they nailed down that it was actually water, though.
Well, even not necessarily water, H2O, still liquid sources.
Well, let's suspend a little bit of disbelief here.
Okay.
Yeah, we can.
What if?
Yeah, we can agree that silicon-based life forms, because mainly we're all carbon here, but we agree that silicon-based life forms are possible, or other base element creations of life structure.
Yeah, that's my thing. I think that if we ever saw, aliens or met with a creature from another planet, everybody just assumes it would be humanoid, and that's kind of the thing, because we're a carbon-based life form. We can't perceive anything beyond a carbon-based life form. I think that, maybe we have already met alien life or have already seen it, and it was something that we just can't wrap our heads around. like a silicon life form, like maybe it was, a plutonium-based life form that nobody really could wrap their heads around. You saw this anomaly, and you thought, oh, it's like the Northern Lights. But maybe that was an entity with intelligence.
One of those green stripes in the sky that we think is the aurora borealis is a serpent sailing through space.
Maybe that would be a space sea monster. Am I wrong? I mean, the possibility exists. We don't know. We've only quantified it in the ways that we understand. But there's so much more that we don't understand and will never understand.
Even without going to space, we've already, admitted so much that the ocean is just about as much of a mystery as the space, with the small percentage of it that we've actually explored.
Yeah. Who's to say?
Who's to say it's not the other way around, and that some of the creatures in the depths of our ocean are alien creatures, not not the other way around. Not sea creatures in space, but space creatures in the sea.
Now, do you mean alien to us or life from space? Like meteor crashed in the ocean and some microbial life started surviving and forming and thriving and changing?
Precisely that.
Yeah, the latter.
Mm-hmm.
One day, an explorer out in the Pacific in an uncharted area comes across a giant like Marlboro from Final Fantasy, and it comes out of the water. I don't care what they say. That thing came from space.
Goddamn alien. Well, I mean, it could be the same thing in other places too. I mean, shoot, in the Amazon here recently, they just found another whole sect of leaf geckos that look like the plants. So who's to say that any sort of weird creation couldn't have changed itself to look like something else?
The coral-backed Leviathan.
Yeah, or, I mean, even the sea dragons. There's also, like, sea dragons that look like bull kelp.
Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of stuff like that. Where the hell did they come from?
I think the idea that sea creatures are ever thriving and changing due to man's intervention and what's being put in the ocean, not just the pollutants or what's considered that, but not the chemicals, GMOs, steroids, filtering down, changing things over generations, because generations are different in the animal kingdom.
Well, that's kind of what Nep was talking about with the molecular makeup of the environment, because they're different depending on which locale and where you are.
Right. Thanks to us, the Pacific Ocean is made up of petroleum and plastic now.
Okay, so then we get sharks that can withstand harpoons.
Those are some hardy-ass sharks.
The Kevlar shark.
Yeah, give it another 30 years, and we're gonna have street sharks up in here, or at least Jabberjaws, who's gonna be playing some drums.
No respect.
The
silence is when they hunt you.
Yeah, I heard sharks are like ocean bears. So when a shark is coming at you, just say, "Hey, shark!" And you slap the water and you thrash around, and they're supposed to.
I disagree. I don't.
I'm pretty sure it's the exact.
Mythbusters proved that punching it in the nose will make a shark go away.
That's because they have like so many receptors in there. Yeah, and it's actually better if you punch them by the gills.
You can't punch a bear in the nose and they'll just trot off like, "Oh, you're mean."
No, a shark.
Oh, no, you said bears of the sea.
Father. And he goes off to eat some honey.
He said the sea bears. Sharks are bears of the sea, and I was like, I don't think you can punch a bear in the face and be all right. Maybe a bear cub, you might be okay, but that's just a dick move.
And you're bone. Hey, cub.
Just punching children. You're an
Hey, Yogi, I'm telling the Rangers, somebody punched me.
Yogi.
Would that still be domestic abuse? Because the forest is their home, and they had an intruder, and how would that stand in a court of law?
The beanie. We broke into their
There was no trespassing signs. And purple trees. If we discovered some giant sea creature, sea monster that hasn't been discovered, I think the biggest argument that would come from it would be preservation of the species or farming of the species for a food source and resources of other kinds. Like if we found a giant octopus or squid, that'd be money for food and pharmaceuticals.
Just because we found it doesn't mean that it's good to eat. I mean, let's take a second to remember pufferfish, unagi, or whatever. You know, unless you cut it appropriately, it will kill you to eat it.
Oh no, I agree. I agree. You can't just start willy-nilly cooking stuff and eating it out the gate and not knowing what parts to eat.
Beyond that, Poda, you're always interested in the social ramifications and the legal ramifications of things. If we were to find something like that, it would not be farmed, it would not be hunted, it would be immediately put on an endangered species list because we would assume that there aren't many since we just now found one. And until we could find enough of them that we could start mating them, then they'll achieve a status more like a panda, where yes, we know how, that we're building their species back up, and say we got lucky enough that we built them up until we knew how many there were and we could finally take them off the endangered species list. They would still be protected from being hunted for stuff so that they don't immediately go right back onto the endangered list. It would be generations before we get to the point where we could even consider harvesting them for food or pharmaceuticals. Of course, by then the poachers will have figured it out.
I think it's funny that his first thought is, hey, a new creature, can we eat it? I mean, the first person that saw a tiger probably thought the same thing. Hey, look at that tiger. Can I eat it?
Yeah, the tiger thought the same thing.
Yeah. True enough.
But I'm going to chalk that up for progress, because if his first thought is, when we find it, can you eat it, instead of, can I survive fighting it?
That's true enough.
That's progress. Congratulations.
Yes. Well, that did move to number 2 because
how am I going to cook this mother?
Calamari is delicious, so it got bumped up when we're thinking about the Kraken between fighting.
Oh, imagine a colossal squid as big as it is. That would feed like 30, 40 people.
And if you deep fried that like a calamari, can you imagine Kraken cracklings?
You just opened a restaurant.
Kraken barrel.
Southern deep fried calamari, Kraken barrel. I love it.
Yeah, but only old fishermen eat there.
I don't know. Have you tried Kraken barrel? Yeah, it's a little salty.
The prices are a little salty.
Oh, ridiculous. Kraken barrel. I like that a lot.
Yeah, well, on the topic of fighting them, I don't think they would really stand a chance. If once humanity discovers them, we could wipe them out immediately if we wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
At this point in time, we could. But that's part of the fun of the whole sea monster mythos is, it was so built up when we couldn't and when we didn't have the means. And so even a whale, people would see this hulking mass, like riding along the ship's side, and that's a sea monster. I mean,
all right.
I've never heard of a whale. like a 16-year-old boy hauling rope across the deck, looks over the side and sees that. Oh, like he's never heard of a whale. Education wasn't what it is now. They would have never have known. Besides hearing weird, crazy tales and stories.
I'd like to see it get to the point, though, where the sea creatures do come out of the sea and we have to battle them for Pacific Rim. We have to build giant mechs and fight them.
I was just thinking about that on the basis of alien invasion as a tactic for infiltration or conquering giant creatures, just throwing them out there like that. Doesn't seem like it seems like number 20 on the list of alien tactics for invasion.
Well, I would like to kind of herald that to the whole Cthulhu mythos too. I mean, the elder gods have been slumbering beneath the surface
for
millennia, and something awakens them. It's the same kind of thing.
Those things are
like the kaiju that would come out and smite the Earthicans.
Yeah, those things are all tentacle. Tentacles and eyes. I forgot those would be considered. You could consider those sea monsters.
I mean, really, yeah.
You usually got wings, though, too, right? How many sea creatures really have wings?
Well, we got the flying fish.
Much is yet to be discovered, Lee.
Like they would be adapted. I mean, the wings serve a different purpose for swimming under the water and mobility, but surprisingly, they could be useful out of the water too. But then you'd have to have the pressure pressure of the sea differential on the body type of the creature.
Well, when you're talking of the sheer mass, I don't know. Would a whale get the bends? No, because it normally has to come up to the surface to get oxygen. You know what I mean? And they could do it in an incredible rate, and they're huge. What's to say that it's not the same kind of situation?
Well, that's what I mean, is the ocean itself is the factor to facilitate the large bodies and the mass because of the water itself. Out of the water, like jellyfish, not scary at all. Can still sting you, but they're just a glob of goo or out of the water.
Now, you know how like dragonflies need water for their life cycle. They're not a water creature, but But say there was a water drake, like a dragon that has no feet. It just has wings and it's a serpent body, like a wyvern, but needs the water to nest, to reproduce, and has to dive underneath the surface the same way that sea mammals have to come to the surface to breathe. Say they have to go underneath to get their water breathing and then come back out and spend most of their time flying around holding their breath.
That's interesting. I never thought of that.
And gestation cycles like a cicada.
Yeah.
Spending. That would be interesting. The gestation cycle of a creature of mythology, like trolls being their toddler for 200 years or something like that. That'd be kind of scary if that were to be possible. Like there's a sea creature out there right now that is just in the larval form, which would remain in the sea, but they can become terrestrial. It just takes that's what wiped out the dinosaurs. They showed up once and ate them all.
They had their cycle. It took their turn.
All right. Yeah. And what if the Leviathan is the larva?
Oh, that's the small version. That would be crazy.
Well, luckily, there's only one.
And then it becomes a giant crustacean or something.
A giant crab creature.
That is another viable sea monster, is crustaceans, lobsters, and crabs who don't stop growing.
Some of them get really big. Like really big.
Yeah, I think there was reports of a lobster that was as big as a school bus once. Or
that's a sea monster.
That's a sea monster. That is a big hunka chunka.
It's a big water bug.
Yeah.
It's like even giant. There could be giant oysters type clam creatures down there. They're just so far down we couldn't find them, but by scale, huge.
Like Venus came out of.
Yeah, and you're talking like a pearl the size of a basketball.
Nice.
How heavy would that be? Because that's condensed sand, right?
more or less.
Like-
Like coal condenses into a diamond, sand condenses into a pearl.
It's not lead. It wouldn't be incredibly heavy, but I mean, I'm sure it would have heft,
It would be heavier than a basketball.
but not as heavy as a boulder.
Maybe like a bowling ball. Like a 13-pound bowling ball.
All right,
20.
who would win? Who would win in a fight? Leviathan or Kraken? Given the base archetypes as a standard for each creature, who do you think would win?
Kraken.
I would say Kraken.
Hands down.
They wrap
Tentacles
around, and then there's like the beak that's like eating through either the like back or the stomach or something like that. And it may take a while, and it may be an agonizing fight, but I think a Kraken would get it.
I believe that if the Kraken really is as closely related to a squid as we surmise, then it's got the ink defense as well, and that's going to be a serious advantage. And in the real world, there aren't too many creatures that will take on a squid, giant or not.
Yeah, and I think the Kraken would be more octopi in nature than squid. It may have the head type of a squid for swimming, possibly, to get over great distances, but when it comes to stories of the tentacles themselves, that sounds way more octopus to me.
Half and half.
An octopus,
Yeah.
they have, like 9 or 10 brains? Each leg does act independently. Each leg has its own brain in an octopus. And from hearing the stories of like a Kraken, it seems like that would be more of what it would be.
Which-
They act independently of each other, not directed.
That would be a hilarious scenario. The tentacles are attacking the ship. Someone has to chop one off. They succeed, but the tentacle is still trying to bring food to the mouth, so it just throws the guy over the ship because it just assumes the mouth is that way.
I think there's got to be a coordinating brain in there somewhere. They can act independently, but they know where their mouth is.
But he's chopped it off. It's not attached anymore. There's no locale.
So it's just randomly flipping a guy overboard. Woo-hoo! Somebody get that tentacle off my deck!
This is what we do, right?
All right, so I think a lot of good theories, ideas, and thoughts were provoked in this one, and the possibility of sea creatures in reality and outside of reality, and possibly on other planets of a different nature, and governmental intervention. It's been fun. We hope you all enjoyed the talk. Please comment if you have any theories that we didn't hit, or an idea that hasn't really been proposed anywhere else, like the locale being territorial by seas. Thank you all for joining us, and until next time, say goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Adios, muchachos.
Until next time.
Thank you all for joining us today on another episode of Raiding the Fringe. If you have any comments or ideas on today's topic, you can leave a comment or contact us directly at raidingthefringe@brainforger.com. We also would ask you to like, subscribe, and follow us. You can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Libsyn, or wherever you get your podcast. Once again, thank you for joining us as we raid the Fringe.